Well, welcome to this episode of the TriPOD. We're joined today by a very special guest and friend of the podcast as well.
Yes, very good. Much better.
There could be a fight for the number one fan of the pod between him and Chris. But yeah, Scott is a director of photography. The first question we're going to get to after Matthew does your bio is, what does that mean? Okay. What does a DOP do? So hello, Scott. Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for coming here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
And nice to be, we've known each other for a long time now, so it's nice to kind of, first of all, just see you in person, but also just come on the podcast. I think you texted me about it ages ago when you first started it, and then Kev, you actually called me out mid-podcast and laid down a gauntlet.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That does sound like me.
And then in the YouTube comments, I said I've picked the gauntlet up. Schedule dependent.
Well, we've managed to find a very narrow window of opportunity in our schedule, haven't we? Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. Because I'm about to say in the bio, first met you in 2013, obviously through Gav, who is on our team. And my understanding of it at the time was that you'd spent a lot of time working on music videos with Gav. Mm. You know, I'm going specifically by your credits on IMDb. I'm sure you shot other shots before this, but like when we first met you, I forget whether you just shot them both or they were both about to go, but Reboot and Run were the two shorts that you were working on. I know both got, awards attention. I know some won awards. Mm-hmm. Obviously at that point you always had a very clear target in mind of where you wanted to be, which is obviously DOP on features and TV. And you were sort of, I would suggest, a bit split at the time because you were obviously taking opportunities you could to work on shorts and music videos, taking opportunities to work with companies like us to shoot TV ads, corporates even, but at the same time you started basically working your way up the quite strict ladder of hierarchy in the other side of the industry, which is something I think we might talk about a couple of times today, is like the differences. There's obviously a lot of crossover, but it's still fundamentally two very different things, like the world that you were kind of trying to make inroads in our world. But obviously you did that, and I know that you worked on a lot of TV shows in particular, camera assistant, second camera assistant, trainee, and kind of working your way up that ladder. But within that, I know that also, through personal connections and work connections, you got quite friendly with Cy Bell, who's obviously someone else from the region that's gone on to have quite a high profile career. Mm-hmm. And my take on it was that as you were working your way up that ladder, you kind of were, to an extent, watching what he was doing. And I know he certainly got to a point where he went, right, well, I just need to stop doing certain types of jobs because otherwise I'll only be thought of for those roles. And I know that you had that same point. Yeah. So it was probably about 5-6 years ago, probably when you started working, the first thing you did with Corrupt FM. It seemed to me like that was the turning point. That was where that kind of, as with a lot of things, it's about networking and being in the right circles and being in the right place at the right time in it. But that seemed to be a tipping point where you decided, I don't really want to do these types of jobs anymore. I want to focus on this. I wait for the right opportunity. That came along, and then that seemed to open the door to where you're at now, which obviously we'll talk about later. But obviously recently, working as a DOP on a series of Like Mobeen, Henpocalypse, and then is it pronounced G-Wed?
It's Go-Ed.
Go-Ed.
So it's kind of an abbreviation of Go Ahead.
Right.
But not spelled like that.
Which, depending on when people are listening or watching this, is on right now on ITV. So that's all to say, in about 10 years, you've achieved the aim. You've got to where you want to be. Now, obviously, I'm sure you've got ambitions beyond that, but that was the potted history, I thought, in the 10 years that we've known you. That seemed to be the tipping point about 5 years ago. Is that fair? Yeah,
and it's quite well summarised, really. I mean, we're all quite similar in that I think that's why we got on really well when we all met, was that, and I actually think we met before Gav came in the company, because I did Frank's with you guys, which is possibly pre-Gav joining the company. But either way, it's been a long time now, and I think we bonded quite a lot in those early days because you're both like big film fans as well, and so am I. And that's kind of where I've always wanted to be a filmmaker since I was a kid, and it was just trying to find like the sort of avenues to kind of like get to where I wanted to be. as kind of a kind of working class lad in the Northeast, it can seem quite difficult to get to that level. And back when I was starting, there wasn't that many people you could kind of look to kind of get advice. And the
Two Scots.
Yeah,
And that's about it.
That's it. I often get, my uncle used to always mention the Ridley Scott thing, because I'm from North Shields and he was from South Shields, and my uncle
It's a
used
whole
to,
different world.
I know the time. There's a huge gap between us and anyone from South Shields.
Washes away many sins.
Yeah, it does. But my uncle used to always call us. He used to jokingly call me Ridley when I was like little. He'd be like, "War Ridley, you're gonna go down Ridley Scott's route." And I think that's because there's a sort of slight misconception about because I've got director in my job title, that I'm not actually like a director. That's why, to be honest, now I kind of refer to myself more as a cinematographer, because I think it sort of like there's a bit of a muddying of the waters in regards to what director of photography means. But yeah, there was always that goal of like becoming like a filmmaker and working on TV and film. But it's, when I sort of left college, where I studied like TV and film, and I was kind of like cold emailing, and I even wrote letters back then, because this was probably like 15, nearly 20 years ago, and there was quite a lot of sort of brick walls and there wasn't many opportunities. And it kind of got to a point where I think back then maybe Biker Grove was still shooting up here, and then maybe Spender when I was like really young, and then there was a show when I was a bit older called 55 Degrees North. But other than those sort of shows shooting, there wasn't really that much happening in the Northeast. So I kind of just had to sort of like start to earn money from the skills I'd kind of learned at college and in higher education. So I'd started like operating for my lecturer when I was probably, I think I technically did my first professional job when I was like 17, maybe 18.
So your lecturer at college actually was a cinematographer.
He ran his own video production company. He was called. That's called.
Unusual. That's
Yeah. He was called Keith, and he kind of noticed that I was quite a good camera operator on like the films I was making in college, and he just sort of pulled me aside one evening and just said, "Look, like I do, that I run my own company, and do you want to come and do some operating for me?" So I operated for him on quite a few projects. I think the first one I did was North Shields Christmas Market, like filming that with him, So that was my first like paid gig. And I was like, right, I'm getting paid to operate, which is kind of what I've always wanted to do. And it was more about just like, how do I keep earning money and keep shooting? And to be honest with me, even now, I would, if someone asked me to do a corporate video tomorrow, like when I'm not working, I'd happily do it. Because I think any day that I'm working and I'm behind the camera, I feel like that's like sort of a success of a day, because I'm literally getting paid to do the thing that I love. But that's not like I say, I'm not trying to diminish that type of work, because I still think it's a skill in itself. But it was very much about like the filmmaking and storytelling side of things that I wanted to kind of be a part of.
I'm going to use a word here that might sound a bit, well, I think it's actually appropriate, but it's because you are an example of an actual craftsman, as in you have a thing that you have put all your time and effort into learning how to be really good at, and that's what you do.
What's that expression? Well, thank you. What's that expression if you do? How many hours is it you've meant to have done something before you're an expert?
10,000 hours?
I don't know if I'm quite at that level. I'm like, but I've done it.
I don't know, they tot up.
They do tot up. And I think for me, I was a camera assistant for many. So once I kind of had these like two things running in tandem, basically, or in like kind of like tangent to each other, where I was kind of like shooting my own stuff, corporate videos, working freelance for people like you guys and other local companies, music videos with Gav, people like that. And then I remember specifically there was a sort of turning point where I was kind of working at Odeon part-time. At the same time I was a projectionist, or I was a floor, like a team leader, and then I worked in projection. And I was doing like quite a lot of wedding videos at the time. And I was earning quite good money from them, because I was one of the first people in the Northeast to start shooting on like DSLRs. And I was doing like DSLR weddings, and I was earning good wedge off it.
But that's not what the DS and DS Media stood for, was it?
No, it wasn't. It stood for something else, Matthew.
It did, yeah.
But I remember that, a short film shot in Newcastle called Orthodox, that was directed by David Leon of Vera fame. Cybele shot it. Stephen Graham and Michael Smiley were in it. And a few people who I loosely knew from like the industry, from floating around, were on this short film. And I remember it was like the sort of early days of Facebook, just kind of like looking at my phone at work, sitting in the projection office at Odeon, and like Stephen Graham was basically like in Newcastle making the short film, who was one of my favorite actors at the time and kind of still is. And I just remember it sort of just flicked a switch in this where I was just like, I should be on that set. Like, that's what I want to be doing. Like, and it was kind of a bit of a wake up call. I'm like, right, how do I want, because I'd almost like given up, you know. I was like, I've tried to knock on these doors and get in as a camera trainee on these various productions and with various production companies. And that just kind of flicked a switch in us where I was just like, no, I'm not. I'm kind of like, tolerating is probably the wrong word, but it's like, that's like, I'm drawing a line in the sand now. I need to sort of have another go at this. Otherwise, I'm going to just become increasingly unhappy, basically. I was like so jealous seeing this film happen. So that's like when I did a sort of another wave of like emails to people. And to be fair, Sai was one of the only people who actually replied to my email. I've still got the email saved on my computer, Sai's reply, because it was like quite a meaningful reply from Sai. And and I think what I was trying to say was like, look, even though I don't shoot on your higher end big cameras, like at the time it was like the original Alexa Classic, like I have been shooting for years and I feel like I've got like transferable skills. I just need the opportunity to sort of show people that I can learn this side of things, you know, and give me a kind of, can you just please give me a shot? It was kind of as close as you can get to begging without actually begging. And
sounds like a very cultured beg.
Yeah, it was. And basically just saying like, look, I've got another job and I earn money from other means. I can happily come along and I'll work for free. Like I'll come and do your short films and whatever you're doing. And
just tipped over from begging into prostitution.
And you know, the whole free work thing is another conversation. We might touch upon it on this, where I'm an advocate of getting out there and shooting, working on freebie shorts with other filmmakers, like emerging filmmakers. So, you know, if you're all just getting together and no one's getting taken advantage of, you're all working for free, pulling in the same direction, trying to make a film, I think that's quite a magical thing, and I think it's something that should be supported and not shot down, like you see in quite a lot of like online forums, you know. And I've had to wade into some of those debates before, giving my opinion on it, you know, because really the free work that I did early on is the kind of reason I am where I am today, because it's like a branching effect. You know, you meet people, they'll introduce you to someone else, and it's just like, I say, your network's just like ever expanding, and then people who you might have met on a short film 5 years earlier might give you put a little word in for you to get in as a camera trainee on Vera, which is what happened to me, you know. So anyway, Sai got back in touch and said, yeah, like, you know, coincidentally, David Leon had done my very first dailies on Vera at the same time. And David Leon, the director, had said, I met this lad on Vera. He's like really, really good crack, and like I think he'd be a good camera trainee. So there's this sort of like coincidence there. And Sai got me on his job, and then I was his camera trainee for a while under him and Tom Finch, his focus puller, and then I was his second AC for a while across a few projects. Second AC is second assist camera, which is the next run up from camera trainee. And then he even got me like operating like B camera and stuff on some of his stuff, and I did some second unit work for him on a couple of features that we did. So he was being like quite a big part in terms of my development and stuff. So that was all kind of like going on whilst I was still shooting all manner of stuff, you know. So I was like a camera trainee on Vera, working, you know, across that like 4-month job, still like shooting my own bits and pieces on the weekend. And then as soon as Vera finished, I would just go back to like operating on like corporate videos and stuff like that. So yeah, it was quite an interesting path in that.
There's a couple of things there. One of them is that's now at least the second that I'm aware of, there may be more points in your career since I've known you in the 10 years or so where you've come to a fork in the road and you've thought, basically shit, I got off the pot. It's like, you know, this is what I want to do. I'm not making the inroad I want to make, so either I need to change this or go in a different direction. And both times that you've done it that I'm aware of, it's worked out.
Yeah. And it doesn't work out like immediately either, you know. I think for me, like when I stopped camera assistant, so I was a camera assistant for about 5 years and worked on all manner of like TV drama and features, like UK stuff, and worked under some like great DOPs and worked in some great camera teams. I think probably I don't want to say it's overconfidence, but maybe more like naivety, that I thought when I stopped assisting, I would kind of have the same sort of career trajectory that Cy had. You know, Cy basically assisted for a little bit, but he shot a load of shorts, then he got a couple of low budget features, and then he went over to Ireland and did like Ripper Street, and then that led to like Peaky Blinders, and now he does like big TV stuff. And I thought, and also like people around me as well, like people who are in the industry locally would make little comments like, oh, you're going to be sort of the next Cy or whatever. And I kind of like believed it a little bit, because I thought like it happened with Cy, it'll hopefully happen with me, and I thought I had good contacts and I was like shooting quite nice work, but it just didn't happen as quickly as that, because like everyone can work hard, but it's like some of the opportunities don't come along, or it's a bit of luck. And so I think it's just
timing as well.
It's timing.
Something and you commit to something else.
Yeah, I didn't get like a feature early on like Cy did, and everyone's sort of like path is like a little bit different, you know. So I think for me, like those things came like a lot more slowly than I thought they would. And then obviously the pandemic kind of happened, which was almost like 2 years out for everyone in our industry, you know, because everything was just on hold for so long. But yeah, it's just been a constant sort of approach of just like chipping away at things, still just doing like shorts, even though I was like doing slightly bigger like TV bits and pieces. And I think that the sort of like turning point was, I remember I'd got in with a focus puller called Steve Smith, who was like really lovely. And I did a couple of jobs with him, and then he got this really big ITV show called Paranoid, which was out a few years, I mean, probably like 5 years ago now. And it was like a 10-month shoot in Manchester. And I remember he rang us and he was like, oh, I've got this job, Paranoid, like, do you want to do it? I'd love you to do like A camera, second AC. And as the A camera, second AC, you're kind of like the primary AC. If you've got a 2-camera job, you kind of like take the lead. And the B camera second AC is kind of a little bit subservient to you. So you're like working with the A camera focus puller in regards to all the incoming and outgoing kit, because every week your kit might be changing and you're doing different things and stuff, and you're in different areas. So you're really helping the A camera focus puller kind of run the show a little bit, you know. I had got to a point in my career where I was starting to do more B camera second AC, because it was like quite a little bit less work and I could step off jobs to shoot my own stuff. So I was going, me and a local camera assistant called Andrew Binns, who's a focus puller now, Binsy, we'd gone to this little groove where we'd go for a job together, and I'd like happily just like, you go for A camera, I'll take B, and then if I need to jump off to shoot something, then I can. And with this Paranoid job, Steve was like, I kind of really want you to do A camera. And I was like, I just don't know if I can dedicate like 10 months of me life where I won't be able to shoot anything within that 10-month period of time. So I thought about it, rang him back, I said, is there any way I can do like B camera? And he was like, well, I kind of want you to do A camera. And I was like, if I did B camera, is there a chance that I can just cover myself now and again and step off? And I think I had a couple of short film scripts that I was going to do that I was quite excited by. And I think maybe like I had a Super Casino commercial coming up with another local company who I used to work for.
You can say it, we'll just bleep it out.
It's fine. I'm not going to mention other companies' names on your podcast.
Correct.
And Steve rang me back and said, look, I've spoke to the DOP and he just wants consistency for the whole 10 months. And that kind of made my decision for me, really. I remember ringing my other half, Kerry, at the time, and just thought, this is a kind of like a big decision here. It's I take this 10-month job and not shoot anything for 10 months, which I felt would be really detrimental to me kind of progress as the DOP, or I do the job. And I turned it down. And I didn't really realize it, but in that moment, that was me doing my last like AC job. I didn't AC again after that. But it was very daunting, because even on paper, you know what your daily rate's going to be. You can quickly calculate what you're going to earn in that period of time.
That's the thing, is like the thing that's the most elusive, presumably, on your side of the industry is certainty. It's consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's come along and saying there's effectively a year's worth of work. That must have been difficult to turn down.
Oh yeah, really hard.
Just on the practical level of the safety and security of it.
And you know that you're never going to earn what that equivalent amount would have been as a second AC, even as a DOP where you earn more money. I would never have earned anywhere near that in that year, because at that point in my career I was shooting less frequently. Smaller, like 1 or 2 day projects would be like the bulk of my like work. In fact, until I did B camera operating on People Just Do Nothing Series 4, that was probably the first time when I did that job where I'd invoiced for more than like 2 days back to back for like years. And then it wasn't, then I did that job. And then after that, it went back to being quite bitty again. Even when I did that job, I thought, all right, I'm doing big camera on this quite big, like rough cut TV comedy job. It's only a matter of time before I end up doing a rough cut comedy of my own, or I'll do more B camera stuff. And Wixie, the DOP, asked me to do B camera with them on, was it called Friday Night Dinner or something like that, Channel 4 show. And I had to turn that down because of an availability thing. And then you just get out of the groove with someone. Like he got someone to do B camera on that job, and then he asked them to do the next job, you know. And then again, it was another one of those things where there's like another little lull in my career, and I was like, oh God, have I like massively messed up by not doing like Friday Night Dinner? So you constantly kind of like doubting yourself, you know. And then it wasn't until really it took someone kind of coming out from outside the region to kind of really change me life and career. And that was a guy called John McQueen, who I kind of owe everything to, really. He was producing a pilot called Dead Canny, which shot in concert. This was only about 18 months ago, maybe like 2 years ago now. And you know, you see all these like job postings on social media and stuff, and there's been so many times I've seen like a pilot is going to be shooting, low budget pilot going to be shooting in the Northeast, and a lot of the time I'll read them, I'll be like, I've never heard of you. Like these things like never end up happening, or it's just a bunch of people. You see this thing all the time, like, oh, we've got Netflix interest, and I'm like, no, you haven't. No, you haven't. And when I read it, I saw the post, and it initially read like one of them types of things. I was like, oh, yeah, it's like eye rolling. But then Northeast Screen kind of mentioned it to me as well. Katie from Northeast Screen, I think, got in touch and said, oh, this is like a legit thing that's happening. They're doing this pilot. And I think it's because the production company who were doing it hadn't really done much at that point. And anyway, John McQueen just kind of rang me out the blue and said, we're doing this pilot in concert, like just wanted to sort of say hello, and your name's been in the mix for it. And that initial conversation, we were on the phone for nearly an hour, and it was just like talking to a mate. He was so easy to talk to, and we were just talking. He had sent me the script, by the way, prior to this.
Was he directing or producing?
Producing. And he'd done like quite a lot of like good stuff, like Phone Shop and Spliced and stuff like that, like Channel 4 sort of comedy stuff. He was just asking like what my approach to the script would be, and I was just sort of spitballing ideas to him, and it was a really great conversation. And then I kind of realized at the end of it, after I'd hung up, I just thought, did that kind of segue into like an interview? But it didn't feel like it, you know, it just felt like really natural. And then basically he got back in touch and said like, look, I really love talking to you. Like I'd love to do a Zoom with like you and the director, Teresa Varga. And we did a Zoom together. That went really well, and I talked with Teresa.
You seem your part of the Zoom was very well lit and framed.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, naturally lit, 3/4 angle, a little bit of fill, a little backlight, nice little tungsten backlight. And then got on really well with Teresa. You know, Teresa was like asking me sort of kind of technical stuff, but she really was much more interested in like how I feel like the relationship, how do I perceive like my relationship to a director, like what I bring to that side of things.
One of your questions.
There you go.
Should I answer that now within this anecdote?
Yeah.
And in all honesty, like it's about really my primary thing. I think is that like I'm the right hand person. Like I'm their right hand man. I'm there for them to support them. It sounds cheesy, but I'm there to like support them through the process, because it's so hard for a director to actually like make a TV show, the pre-production, the production, the post-production. They're being pulled like in every direction every day from like multiple people, multiple departments, so many like small, medium battles every day. And it's about just like being a sort of support to that person to help them through the process, as well as all the technical stuff that I can bring to the table.
Yeah, because presumably a lot of directors will say to you, right, we're going to shoot this scene, I want this lens on it and that kind of lighting, and fine. But equally, your position, in my opinion, should be that the director could come to you and say, I have no idea on the technical side of what I want, but this is the shot that I want. Make that happen for us.
And some directors are incredibly technical and some aren't. Some are much more like actor focused, and like storytelling focused and performance based. some have a combination of the two things, you know. But yeah, with Teresa, it was just like, I just want to like, I feel like I'm there to support the director through the process, and that I can be like a sounding board for like any questions you might have, not necessarily even to do with like the cinematography of the project, even if you just need a bit of advice on anything. And she really like dug that answer, I think, and she said afterwards like that was the sort of answer that kind of made her realize that I was the kind of right man for it, you know. And I still believe that now. I think, you know, if you get on really well, you should, if you've not worked with a director before, if you do a TV show together, really you should be coming out the back end of it like really good mates, because you've been through like so much together. And touch wood, like that's been the case so far. But anyway, I got that job, got the pilot, and after that it was just like a real amazing just run of work where I was just kind of bouncing from one thing to another.
So that pilot ended up on Dave?
Yeah, UK TV.
Was it on that, was that the plan as you were working on it, or did that come after the fact?
It was part of a like pilot scheme that Dave did, so they made like between 6 and 8 pilots, I think, and then didn't commission any of them.
So is that just like reputation as you're hot, and then the next person is ready for you on the next job?
What I've kind of realised that it's it's genuinely all it boils down to, and I've always kind of known this anyway, I think, and I feel like it, and I think you'll agree, the only two things you want from anyone you're working with is, pardon me French, is don't be a dick and like be good at your job. I think if you tick both those boxes, you're a nice person to be around. Like, you'll try and make it work, do your best that you can, not like rub people up the wrong way, be respectful and polite. And then also, if you can also do a job to like quite a high standard, then that's all people want, really.
Yeah.
And on TV as well as like meet your schedule, complete the day. That's all it boils down to, is complete the day's schedule, complete the week's schedule, complete the production schedule on time. So basically I was doing lagging. So basically I did that pilot with them. We were like 3 days in and we were back at the hotel, and John just sort of like, in a joking way but quite serious, just sort of grabbed me by the elbow and was just like, Scott, can I just have a little word with you over here, please? And he did it in a very sort of like headmastery way on purpose. And I was like, here we go, I'm getting sacked. And he was like, oh, just so you know, I think you're a proper top lad, and like, I'm really loving the work you're doing. And I've got this kid show that I'm shooting in the summer. It's like 10-part kid show, and Teresa's going to direct it. And do you want to shoot it? And I was like gobsmacked. I was kind of like, do you want to just like wait until I've done the last 2 days, or until you've like been in an edit suite and you can like interrogate the rushes and realize that I'm actually not very good? And he's like, no, I don't need to. And he pushed hard at that point, because at that point I had quite a lot of like moody drama short film stuff. My reel was incredibly depressing. I think that reel is still on my website and it's very somber. And I think the exec of that show had seen me reel and was a bit like, you want this guy to do a kids thing? It was quite a bleak show reel. But that's like, it's the sort of stuff I like, Fincher. And
well, that was one of the other turning points that I was referring to before, which I know you were up for a different kids show that you didn't get. Mm-hmm. And you were at that point after that where like, well, what's next? Like, yeah. what if I'm not getting that, what am I going to get? Mm-hmm. Because, and this is, I don't blame the clients for this, but we get asked all the time, we want to make this type of video, whatever it is. So can you please show us that you've made that exact thing for someone else before? And it's like, you said it before, transferable skills. It's like, well, we can't necessarily, sometimes we can, but what we can show you is that we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
We can adapt
just imagine that fan's got your instead.
Because the core filmmaking principles are the same. I jokingly said to John at the time, I was like, just tell him to turn the brightness up on the computer and be sure it'll look much more high key. But like, I knew that I could do, I don't want to say I knew I could do that style of stuff easily, because nothing's easy, but that sort of quite vibrant, poppy, high key lighting that we didn't lag in, which kind of is kind of a video gamey based like show. So it's got like quite a lot of color. Well, it didn't actually. They did a first series that they liked the sort of idea of it and the core like concept, but didn't think it was executed particularly well in the first series, and they wanted to kind of do a soft reboot in series 2, no pun intended. And so that's Teresa and I had done that. We were doing Dead Canny, which was not high key, but had lots of like color pop and stuff. So John was able to like show some rushes from Dead Canny to the exec of Lagging, and then I'm quite like prep focus and mood board focus. So I like pulling like reference. I mean, I think all DOPs have to have that part of the game. You know, pulling references together and basically explaining what your visual approach to something's going to be and trying to communicate with that. So like a combination of like John backing me up, the other exec is called John, the other John saying some stuff from Dead Canny, and then me just basically pitching like I can do this type of kid show, kind of meant that I got the job. And then even in like pre-production and stuff, you know, the BBC execs were quite just concerned because like I'd like not just me, but they were wanting it to have this like I say, this vibrancy. They were referencing like a couple of Nickelodeon shows, American Nickelodeon shows that were much more traditional, like studio audience sitcom stuff. And they were like, I think one of them was called Zapped or something. We wanted to feel like more like Zapped. And then we had like a great design team on Lagging and stuff, so all the sets had lots of color, and we built in loads of like neon stuff, and we were using like interactive lighting from the screens. You know, the kids were on like screens quite a lot, so we had a lot of like screen camera type stuff. And I think it was like 3 days in or something was when the BBC higher ups like first saw the footage, and they were just like, cool, just crack on. And we never really got a note ever again after that. We just sort of shot the rest of the series, and it's a fun, like vibrant, poppy, nice show, and also like good for me to have that on my like reel, because as you say, you can kind of, you want to be able to show like different dimensions to the sort of style of stuff you can do. You know, like I've only done like a couple of like uni talk type things. Like I'm by no means like, you know, Billy Big Bollocks, but like I have been asked to do a couple of uni talks, which I've done and got over me sort of me sense that me imposter syndrome, and went and did them. And you know, both times someone's asked us in this sort of Q&A bit at the end, like, oh, like how would you like define your style, or a question in that sort of ballpark. And I actually don't really think I have a style, to be honest. Like I think it just my style is dictated on by like what that project is that I'm doing at the time. I've got like tastes of stuff that I like, but like to have a style, I think as a DOP is probably like detrimental to the project that you're on. Otherwise you're always just trying to make it like suit what you like.
It goes back to what you said before. Your primary function is to effectively execute the director's vision in it, and that's going to be different project to project.
Yeah.
So your job is, right, how do I meet the challenge on this particular project? So obviously there are directors who work with the same cinematographer and they have a shared preferred style, but that still doesn't stop the cinematographer going working on something else, doing something different.
And I think it's
I'm laughing, by the way, because you're one of a few, well, two specifically, DOPs that we work with. I'm just thinking the other one who at the end of every shoot comes with the cards and goes, I'm sorry, Kev. I hope you can do some of this pile of crap that I've done today.
Yeah, just don't bother billing us. I'm just so sorry.
I have to admit,
just burn the cards when you're done.
I feel I'm quite hard on myself at work every day anyway. Do I like everything I've done in the last year? Like I'm proud of the work I've done, but I do always just see the flaws in it. And I'm just trying to sort of like work out but
that's everyone.
Curse of the creative, that.
I was going to say, anyone in any creative endeavour, that.
Yeah, I would just say, not that this is a therapy session, like, but I would
get the leather couch out.
I think it just means you've just got exceptionally high standards.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a good thing, because you know you've got a lot of years left, Scott. We're still young-ish.
There's a DOP called Benedict Spence whose work I really admire, and I've met him a couple of times. He's a lovely bloke. And I think he keeps like essentially like a mistake log at the end of a shoot. So you'll just like make a note of like what went wrong and why.
Mistake one, I took this job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I thought like I wouldn't necessarily go like that far, although I do think it's quite a good idea, because sometimes you can forget about the mistakes you've made, I think. And I think that's quite like clever of Ben, that he's got that, and it's something you can look back upon and just go, right.
Well, it's the perfect learning tool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you hit a challenge in the future and you think, oh yeah, I kind of had this before and I didn't do it right, so I'll do different work.
It's an acceptance though that there's going to be problems on stuff every time you shoot something. There's always going to be there's always problem solving to do, isn't there?
It's a miracle that like anything gets made any project, but especially like TV and film stuff, there's so many variables kind of working against you every day that to get to the end of the day and that you're even like 75% of what you plan to do is a minor miracle, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to your rule about don't be a dick and be good at your job. I take full credit for spotting Scott's tell on a set. Which was the ultimate act of diplomacy on your part of a director saying, no, I want it like this, and you thinking that's not the best way to do this, but just going along with it and just going, you think so, do you?
Do you know what it is? I actually still to this day, I very rarely say no to something. There's been probably about, I'm not exaggerating, about 5 times in the last year across all the things I've done where I've actually said no, and it'll usually be a health and safety thing. But creatively...
Health and safety for you as the camera operator or for the...
I just think maybe that's just like a little bit dangerous if we do that, or that maybe that might not work. And one of them was like a logistics thing about a proposed location where I was just sort of flagging by the time you actually get all the kit there, we're going to lose like 2 or 3 hours off a day that is already quite tight. So that's the only time I've ever really said no to things. Creatively, I just think it's the worst thing you can do if someone's spitballing an idea and you're just like, nah. Or like, whatever, for whatever reason, it's just how you frame your response. Maybe mine is just like, But, you know, I'd rather even at least listen to their idea and then counter it with a different idea. But just to sort of flat out say no to people, I think. And
well, it also depends on the director, doesn't it? Because, you know, let's just label it as such. A good director, whatever they're directing, it should be open to ideas. And if they come to you and say, well, I want you to set it up this way and do this shot, and you feel that there's a better way to do it, like that should be a conversation. That should just be easy to have. Like there shouldn't be any animus in that.
no. I think, sorry, after you.
I was just going to ask you, I'm still interested to hear, like, you define what a DOP or cinematographer is. Because see, I'm used to AI now, so obviously it gives it in 50 words or less.
I think for me, it's funny because I think a lot of me family and friends probably don't actually really know what I do at work every day. Nor do they care.
When we first started this business, there was a lot of people said to me things like, oh, how's work going? Because you work with computers, don't you? That wasn't that long ago.
Just a huge like misunderstanding. Yeah. I think for me, as you know, I mean, a DOP, I guess the definition would be, or a cinematographer is that you're working in collaboration with the director, mainly in translating like a script, bringing it to life through camera work, lighting, camera movement, trying to help establish and maintain like the tone of the work. But yeah, very much just translating the script to screen in a visual medium. You know, obviously the director is they've got almost like a different sort of like group of things that they're kind of keeping their eye on, whether it's like performance and sort of narrative arcs, and again tone management is like a big thing that the directors.
Loads of directors will just say that their job all day is just to answer questions, isn't it? That's
I mean,
that
when I was talking before about like supporting the director through the process, when we're in the sort of like prep period, you know, like I most of the time we'll share an office with the director in pre-production, because we can just like have tables on each side of the room. We can just like chat to each other when we need to, and it just means they'll go off and get dragged to any manner of things, but when they come back to their office, I'm there if they need to talk about anything. Genuinely, I say to them all the time, it's like, I don't understand how you can actually cope with the volume of stuff that you're having to deal with. Just imagine like every department of a TV show or film having like 20, 30 questions a day for you about anything and everything. To have the headspace to sort of like process all that and deal with it, I just find it, my brain doesn't work like that either. Like I think I can like hyper focus on like 1 or 2 things that I need to do, whereas a director has to have that skill set of being able to like spin like multiple plates.
So what's more common for a director to come to you and say, this is how I want to do it, you figure out the plan, versus you coming up with the pitch for basically to say, I want to do this job because I think it should look like this? What's more common? I
think it evolves more like, so in my experience so far, I'm like 6 series in, I think I've done. It's very much more like So I've just got my new job, which I probably can't really talk about at the minute because I've not done my deal yet. But I had a meeting with the director of that last week. He was up in Newcastle doing like pre-recce.
Well, just in general, it's TV.
I can say it's like I say, I'm not trying to be like evasive. It's just more, I might not end up doing it.
Is it comedy?
No.
Right,
so it's a thriller for Channel 5, which is mint because it's like a step into like slightly...
Back to the darkness.
Yeah, exactly. Back to that sweet, sweet, hello darkness, my old friend.
I've got a reel for you to watch again.
So it's cool for me because I'm going to probably get to flex some muscles that are a little bit more up my street. So he got in touch last week, said, I've heard good things about you. I've been on your website. I really like your stuff. Here's the first 2 episodes. Have a read. See what you think. So I read them. And it's hard when I first read a script. I try to judge it just on the story to begin with. So I have to genuinely like push out any sort of tendencies to start like thinking about like visuals and shots and all that kind of stuff. I try to just literally just judge it on the story, and then I'll read it again just with a sort of visual hat on almost, you know. So I've also realized as well that it's dangerous to start thinking too much about that sort of stuff too early, because you might have sort of like divergent ideas from, you know, what the director's thinking. So I start to like bank like initial ideas, and then I might do like an early mood board that just sums up a bit of the sort of like general tone of how I see it being. But it's not very often that it's like they're like, this is how I see it. They're doing the same thing really. It's like an exploration. They're starting to like work out what it's going to be, and then they're really like reliant on me coming on board. Like I'm usually one of the first people who are hired, because then we just become this like quite tight core foundation of like the pre-production process and the sort of visual development of it. So we almost start talking early on together, saying like, right, what is this going to be? So in that meeting last week, he was like spitballing ideas about ideas that he's had in regards to like the look of it, but also the approach about having maybe like a smaller camera package and multiple smaller cameras, a bit like the Creator. You know, have you seen the behind the scenes of the Creator? No. They were shooting on like smaller, like Sony FX3s. So like, again, he's going, this isn't like prescriptive. I'm not saying like this is how it's going to be. These are just what I'm thinking about. He's just come off this like really big BBC drama called Vigil. He did the second series of Vigil. That was like a co-production with an American network. So, you know, like quite big, quite a lot going on, lots of execs involved. Our job is like a smaller sort of band 1 Channel 5 thriller, so probably a substantially lower budget than he had previously, but he almost just wants to like flex different muscles in regards to like how we're going to shoot it, and maybe be a little bit more nimble and a bit more light on our feet. So I'm just sort of like trying to like take that on. Definitely I would say in the first like week of pre-production, I'm just like listening. I'm just like a sponge. I'm just like, what are the producers saying? What's the director saying? Like trying to work out like what they want, what they feel like they want it to be, and then trying to bring to it like what I think it could be. And then I do something. I didn't do it on Lagging, but when we did Like Mobeen, which I did basically straight after Lagging, I did Like Mobeen series 4. And that was like almost, again, like a soft reboot. It was like 2 shows in a row where they were trying to change the sort of look of the show. So the previous 3 series of Like Mobeen were all shot in Small Heath in Birmingham. At the end of series 3, spoiler alert, Mobeen goes to jail. Series 4 was all set in a prison. So there was the sort of flexibility to kind of give the show a different look. Like they'd never used like sliders and dollies in the previous series of Mobeen. It was basically like handheld on a tripod or doing like gimbal work. So me and the director were like developing, he brought me on board because I was like pitching things in that first meeting with him about like using dollies more and using like zoom lenses and stuff, like trying to make it like a sort of slightly throwback elements to a sort of 70s.
I was just about to say, do you say, you ever seen Scum?
Yeah.
Or certain elements of Clockwork?
So we were like but he was a big cinephile as well, Akash, so we were referencing like 70s cinema, you know. So, you know, you just together starting to just like crack like, oh, what's this going to be? Like the zoom lens thing might have not even been in like the early conversations. It might have just been sitting watching some stuff, like actually zooms would be quite cool in this, and then let's like maybe do some like slow zooms, and you don't really do that much in the TV stuff at the minute, and not comedy stuff anyway. So yeah, it's about just like constant communication, and like I was on a tangent there, but with Mobeen we did this like visual, what we call like a visual approach document, and it was like a multiple page document, like about like tone, camera movement, color palette, some like suggestions of like lenses we could use, because we used like vintage lenses on Like Mobeen, and we did that for ourselves really just to sort of like crack the visual approach together. And by the time you've done like a document like that, it becomes like a bit of a Bible. And then the byproduct of that is that the execs at the BBC Comedy and in Tiger Aspect wanted us to do like a visual pitch to them so they could understand like what our approach to the show was going to be. And it was meant because we'd already made this like document. So all I had to do on that Zoom was just basically just go through this document. And it's like, you know, we use a site called Shot Deck, which is like a sort of loads of frame grabs from like TV and films and stuff. So we'd have a load of like reference images from other shows. And basically you can just go here, this is what, and I think if you look at that document compared to the finished series, I think it's really in the ballpark of what we did, within like, I don't know, like 80, 90%. Yeah. And then after that, I was like, right, I'm definitely just going to do this on everything I do. So it did the same sort of thing with Henpocalypse, did the same sort of thing with Go Ahead, Things You Should Have Done, which is a show that is the last thing that I did, which comes out next week on BBC Three. Did the same thing there, because they're all like so different, you know, communicating your visual approach to the execs, anyone else involved, all the there's so many people you got to answer to, you know, when you do TV stuff. Clearly communicating your approach is like really important, but also doing this document in collaboration with the director means that basically both of you just know inside out by the time you've got to the end of that process, like this is what our intention is for the show.
Well, it's weird because you sound really passionate about the prep side of it. I was going to ask you, like in terms of the life cycle of what you're doing, which part of it is it that gives you the biggest like bit of creative pleasure? Obviously,
when I get paid,
cashing the fat check. Yeah. But I think people would assume it would be like sitting and watching the thing for the first time, but maybe it's not.
I think that's sort of like early like discovery of what it's going to be. I mean, at the minute, I literally found out yesterday I had this job. So I'm really early on, and I mean the earliest I can be in pre-production really, and it does feel like a mountain, and there's so many. I mean, I was just sitting there this morning, that's why I texted you saying, I'll see you at 1:15. I got in 50 minutes later because I had a couple of phone calls to make, and I'm just trying to it almost feels like overwhelming at this point. Yeah. So much like stuff to consider, you know. Once I get over that initial couple of weeks of like starting to figure some stuff out and I get into the groove of prep, it's like really exciting. Like I love doing mood boards, finding reference images. A lot of it comes from like a love of film, so you're trying to like reference back to things that you love and have admired through the years, like how you could like, you know, build upon stuff like that, but obviously make it your own. Shooting, like I absolutely love. Like I love being on set. Like I love working. I've got quite a regular team who I've worked with over the last 18 months. My like core camera team of like Tom Littlewood, my focus puller, and Max Graham, who's my second AC, and Rue, who's our camera trainee. Like we're just like a little family. So like I love just being around them every day. And when it can be like quite hard, my job, and sometimes a little bit stressful, like I've got a really lovely team, and I've worked with the same sort of gaffer and Sparks over the last year, who I really love. So that on-set collaboration is like really lovely. Like I love shooting. I love post. Like I love popping into the edit to see how they're getting on. I love doing the color grade. Like that's quite a big important part of what I do now is, you know, I'm involved in the color grading where we are shaping the look of the show like in post-production. Like I've always been quite, like you'll know, I've always done like bits of editing and stuff, so I've always been quite like techie.
Sorry to interrupt your flow, but when it comes to grading, are you ever straying from what you'd set out to do? I mean, obviously you're shooting things, I presume, in a way that does give you quite a lot of play with the grade, but you've done it with a look in mind.
Yeah.
Are you ever in post where you look at it and go, actually, I'm going to completely rethink that? Or
nah, because I think especially like the last couple of things I've done. Well, the two things I've done through a post company in Manchester called Core, and we had a really great colorist called Matt Brown. He did Mobeen, and then he did Goed. Mobeen, we didn't get time to make what we call a showlet, where we'll do shoot some test footage, go in, get a showlet made. But we had kind of talked about the color palette in that visual document. In Like Mobeen, for example, we kind of pushed the sort of boundaries of the reality of a sort of British prisons design a little bit, in terms of we repainted the prison cells to be like this sort of like quite warm orange color, and then we had them in like burgundy like jumpers, and one of the wings in burgundy and the other wing is in like sort of teal, and there was a lot of like sort of black and Asian skin, like actors and Asian skin tones in Mobeen, and it just looked beautiful. Do you know what I mean? Like that sort of black skin against a sort of orange backdrop with these lovely burgundy sort of outfits, like that color palette we kind of designed with all that in mind. So when we came to the grade, we already had like, we referenced Fargo season 2 and things like that in our mood boards for the grade. So like the grade ends up just being hopefully a excuse me, an improved version of your mood board almost. Like someone just pushed it in an even better direction. And then with Goed, we managed to sort of like work the prep schedule so I could actually shoot some test stuff, which I actually did with Max and Tom in Newcastle. And then I went down to Liverpool and continued my prep in Liverpool. And then I got a train one day up to Manchester with the rushes, and I'd cut a little reel, and then we put that into the color suite at Core and then made a LUT. Excuse me. So for Goed, we actually had a show LUT, but because it was slightly backwards, like I didn't get to shoot the costumes and stuff that I wanted to do. We basically made like 2 versions of a LUT. One which was like pushing the saturation on a scale. So we had sat 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we had what we call minus con, where we were exploring like having a slightly more low contrast look. So we had minus con 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then in the first week of shooting, we would just play around with the LUTs on the monitors and see which one looked good. And it was really good that we did that, because we had burgundy costumes again, and their school blazers were burgundy. And we realized that the LUT that we liked from the rushes that I'd shot was just having this like mad effect on the school costumes. So we kind of moved away from that in the first week of shooting. But that was cool, because that's the first time I've managed to do a show LUT in pre-production before, and that's something we're going to be doing on this next thing. The next thing is great because it's all in Newcastle, and the post house is in Newcastle. And
is it actually set in Newcastle?
No, it's like a nondescript UK city.
Do you want to just explain what a LUT is as well?
Yeah, LUT stands for look up table. So basically our cameras shoot with a very what we call like flat color profile. So there's almost no contrast, saturation to the image.
It's funny when clients see it, isn't it?
Oh, shit themselves. It's very sort of washed out image. So when we're shooting on set, we have what we call like a Rec 709 LUT that we just put on the monitors so that everyone's eyes are just seeing something that's a bit more representative of what the finished output would be. Like when you guys are working with your clients, you would never usually show them what we call the log image, the flat image, because they usually don't like it, or 2, another danger you hear about is that they can get used to the flat profile and actually and I've heard this quite a lot, where people get used to it and actually quite like it. So then you start
big fans of Schindler's List.
It's really great and it's growing on us.
So what you're trying to do is just
take that black and white image and just squeeze it into 4:3 and we'll just rewind the clock back 100 years. Yeah.
So what you're trying to do is just train the eye of everyone to get used to like what the show will look like. Rec 709 is quite a neutral look. The LUTs that we make are probably pushing a bit more of a look. So, with Mobeen, for example, it would have been nice to do a show LUT because we were going for this sort of slightly more 70s-ish kind of color palette. And you don't want to like know that you're always going to do that in post, but like people get used to the Rec 709, and then when it comes to doing the real grade, they start like worrying that it doesn't look right anymore. So you're just trying to train people's eye into like seeing something that.
In that particular instance, is that one of those shows where the main guy, what's his name?
Guz Khan.
is that an instance where he actually has quite a lot of say? So, in other words, if you've set out to create this look and certain executives start to look and say, oh, I don't know about that, would he then step up and say, but that's what we're doing? And is he kind of like the American sort of EP sort of type?
Like showrunner kind of thing.
Is that the way it works?
In British TV, it tends to be, he saw the pre-production document that we made and like really dug it, you know? Like we were given the job, Akash was given the job because they liked Akash and they wanted a different vibe to that series. And I think, again, if we're clearly communicating our intentions in the things that they like, they'd flag it early on if they didn't like the route that we were going to go down. So touch wood, so far, we've never had any notes pushing against like what we're doing because, like I say, we have clearly outlined what we're going to do and they're supporting that through the process. And I don't think there's not much room for being able to like go off the beaten track or whatever the expression is, you know, because people wouldn't tolerate it because it's like, well, that's not what you said you would do, you know. So I think it's about you trying to execute the plan as near to what you said it was going to be, you know, as possible.
Speaking of notes,
he's going to pull up a project from 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on this?
Someone sends you a script, and I'm not talking a short film. I'm talking, you know, a TV series, a feature, whatever it is. Someone sends you a script, and you're doing your first read of it from the story perspective, and you're like,
It's never happened, Matthew.
But at the same time, you start to think, "But I could shoot the shit out of this. I really could make this look mint."
Yeah.
On a personal level, what's that? How's that equation balance out in your mind?
How do I word this? No, I mean, I think...
I'm not talking about any specific projects. I'm just, you could get a script tomorrow.
Yeah.
You get a script tomorrow, that's your reaction. What's your thought process then to decide like what the next step is?
I think for me at this point in my career, like I really don't, if I'm being honest, I don't have much of a choice. I need to like work and my career needs to progress. And I do have specific tastes about the types of film and TV that I like.
Of course.
Whether I'm always going to make that type of stuff is like another question. I mean, I think of all the shorts I read, if I'm being totally honest, I've shot maybe like 30 plus, maybe like 32 shorts. You'll have to check my IMDb with my newly updated bio information. I reckon, if I'm being totally honest, probably about 4 or 5 of them, I thought the scripts were genuinely like really good. And that's obviously because a lot of them are non-professional writers, really, you know. In terms of the TV stuff I've done, I'm lucky so far where I think the stuff that I've read and done has been like really good. Henpocalypse, for example, which actually unfortunately like didn't do too well because I think it's just a little bit left field and was a little bit bonkers. People couldn't quite kind of work it out. On a script level, I think the scripts for that are amazing. I was actually, when I was down in London last, the post-production place like gave me all the episodes so I could cut like a little compilation to put on my website. And I was just like going through it and it's like, this is mint, man. Like it's so well written, it's so funny. And that was like a genuine like buzz to like read that and think, oh, I'm going to get to like sort of translate this to the screen, you know. So I think touch wood so far, the stuff I've done, I've actually quite liked all of them. You know, Go Ahead, like the scripts were good, but like it's not really like it's about like young people in high school, so it's not necessarily like the type of stuff that I would like gravitate towards. But I think we brought like stuff, I don't want to say elevated it because it suggests that it was down here, but I thought we brought like a visual approach to Go Ahead that was actually like quite nice. I think it's quite a nice looking show. It's relatively low budget. Scheduling was like quite difficult on it. It was probably like, you know, the most difficult schedule I've had in terms of the TV stuff I've done in regards to how long the script pages were versus like the days we had to shoot it, and it was a challenge, and I think it actually looks quite nice and looks quite accomplished.
The old adage is you can't make a good thing from a bad script, film or TV,
and
but
I totally
you can make
believe
bad
that.
from a good script. However, even if it's bad, you can always make it look good.
100%. And obviously I do work in a visual medium, and I did especially when I was doing shorts, I'd be like, yeah, the script isn't great, but like I do see things in my head of like how we might do this. And you know, you have that whole thing of just like there's always the shots for your show reel kind of thing, which is true because, you know, most DOPs show reels are just to music, so they don't have to hear the dialogue or know about the story. And as long as you get some like nice imagery for your reel, then that is quite important. That's how I used to feel when I was younger. Now it is very much like I find it completely futile to work on anything if the script isn't good, because it, as you say there, it just doesn't matter. If it falls apart on a script level and the story isn't good, it doesn't matter what I do. It's just irrelevant. If it looks pretty but the actual show isn't good, then it doesn't matter. But that's not to say that the next thing I do, not the thing I'm talking about now because the scripts are good, for the next thing I'm going to do, but something might come across me desk, so to speak, for the thing I do later on in the year, and I might think the scripts aren't particularly great, but if it's working with the director who I want to work with, or I think if I can bring something to it.
I was going to say, it goes back to the networking part of it, doesn't it? Because if something is made that generally people don't receive well, then the people that made it, more so the director, writer than the cinematographer, but still, the people that made it might find that their opportunities dry up a little bit for a short while. Whereas, so I assumed it would be a consideration for you. Obviously, no one wants to work on something that they think is bad from the get-go. But there's always that trade-off, isn't there? But
with Henpocalypse, it's like I was just emailing the exec of it. So that was produced by Val, who are like a really quite prestigious company. You know, they did like I May Destroy You and stuff. They do like really good work. And I was just emailing the producer, Helen Williams, last week, just a sort of little catch-up. And
dear Helen, have you got any work? That kind of little
pretty
catch
much,
up.
like, yeah. Help me pay my mortgage, Helen. And we were just sort of lamenting how, like, you know, people just didn't quite get Henpocalypse. And I think the scripts were great. I think what we did with it was great. The cast were absolutely class. Everything about it was brilliant, I think. And I'm not just biased. I think if it wasn't good, I just wouldn't say it.
Part of it was what you said before. There's a million things to watch.
Yeah.
Even the stuff that does connect with an audience, it's a smaller audience than it was 10 years ago.
And you can't make it connect with an audience. That's like a natural, organic thing. And there's also like, there's always the school of thought that if things like that go out in the summer, they don't do particularly very well because people are out late in the evening. You know, the nights are lighter, and it was this sort of like post-apocalyptic thing, and it was just, there was a definite sort of conversation about whether it was better suited to being like released in the winter, and it might have done a little bit better, but there's a lot of these conversations happen like they're above my pay grade, you know, about when you schedule a show. But there was like that consideration that maybe it went out at the wrong time of year. But again, I've got like no control over that side of it. I just kind of like do my part to the best that I can, and then I just sort of like say I rap, they go off and do posts for like weeks. I usually, sometimes I might go and do something else, or we'll sync back up with each other, and then I'll just rejoin them again for the grade if I'm free. So such a like long process, and all these things are going on. Like, you know, the show that I just did, Things You Should Have Done, which comes out next week. It's really weird. Like, I loved it. The scripts were great, but it's really quite left field and a little bit weird. And, you know, it's really interesting being like, we were at the post-production house doing the grade, and you know the execs there and the director, and they're having like multiple other conversations about like marketing, like what's the trailer going to be, like what's the opening title sequence going to be. And it's funny when you just stop and think about it, and you're just like, yeah, like how are you going to market this show? Like that's a whole other aspect to the process that I'm not involved in. That's actually incredibly complicated. And we were like laughing about it, like where do you even start to describe about like how this, and they've cut a little trailer that I actually think does a good job of like getting across the sort of slightly off-kilter weirdness of it, and even just the choice of music they chose for it is like really perfectly, I think, tonally suits the show. And I wouldn't probably never have thought of that, because you know there's people who are just very good at doing that sort of thing. But I'm really curious to see how that goes down. Like we always knew when Henpocalypse we were making it, we thought it's going to be like very polarizing. People will either really get it and love it, or like not get it and not like it. And I kind of feel like Things You Should Have Done might be quite similar. I think you're going to get a hardcore contingent of people who really like it and really dig it, and then you're going to have loads of people who are just like, what is this weird stuff? It's funny because the next thing I'm going to do, because it's a bit more like traditional like Channel 5 thing, thriller. When I read the scripts, or when I got the end of episode 2, I just thought, I'm finally making something me mom might like. Because all the stuff I've done so far, she kind of watches it just through like being polite and lovely and supportive. But she's just a bit like, it's all a bit weird, the stuff you're doing, all the weird comedy stuff you're doing.
Yeah. Well, listen, guys, we've been going for quite a long time. This man's got to get back and do his prep because he's still 2 weeks away from calming down about it. There was just one last question, really, that I had for you, and it's just about like the future of cinematography. Technology moves quickly. You've talked about some of the older cameras that you've used and stuff. AI is obviously the big one now.
It is.
Like, what do you see coming in the future for cinematography? Is there anything that excites you, scares you, you're skeptical of?
So there was the big BSC show last week, the BSC Expo, which is like a camera tech and lighting technician, camera and lighting technology expo in London. And I actually didn't manage to make it this year, but I was talking to my friend, and he was saying it was quite like lighting focused this year, like not as much like new camera technology. And I do kind of feel it's, excuse me, I do kind of feel it's because we've kind of hit a bit of a plateau with cameras. And it's like, how else are you going to kind of upgrade these things?
Shoots 4K Dolby Vision. I'm not saying it shoots great 4K Dolby Vision, but that's where we're at, and it's mental.
So yeah, I think camera technology has kind of plateaued a little bit, and I don't think it's going to be any huge advancements in the next sort of like couple of years. Obviously with lighting, everything's kind of going down the LED route, and we have everything going back to iPads, and we can kind of remote control everything. That makes our like workflow and time on set like much more efficient than it was. I think in regards to AI, this whole text to video Sora thing, which kind of dropped last week, coincidentally, the night after me and my partner Kiri were talking about like AI and filmmaking and the text to speech stuff, and I was the text to picture stuff that was out recently, and how I was just kind of against it in principle. Then the next morning I woke up, and then this Sora thing had dropped through the night, and the stuff I was seeing the next day was insane. Like there was that like floating through Tokyo thing. There was a kitten running through some like grass, which was amazing. I mean, I think they all look quite AI-y, but like that's like, it's like, what's it going to exactly? What's it going to be like in a year, 2 years? And Sora actually posted a thing on Instagram about it, and I made a comment basically just saying that I fundamentally disagreed with it. And,
I hope you die.
And it got like quite a lot of like response of people agreeing. I think it's really dangerous to sort of like low, mid-level corporate commercial stuff. I really worry that clients are just going to find it much more cost effective to have like an intern just like inputting prompts into Sora and generating like video assets and then cutting them together instead of paying someone like you guys to make something. There will come a point when it'll be at a level that it can replace like traditional like commercial work, but with like huge caveats. I think, you know, you just, like I say, you're just inputting text, aren't you? And then it's just generating certain things, and you don't really have that like fine control over what it's going to be. But I do think it'll replace, unfortunately, load of like online content stuff, definitely. And that's not even in the long term, that's within the next like 12 months. Yeah. And I think it's about just I genuinely think it's going to get to a point soon. You know, when you have like, I was talking to people about this, you know, when you have like the organic veg stickers in like supermarkets, there's going to be a point soon where you can kind of market yourselves on being like the organic veg version of video production.
We brought real humans with a real camera to film this. Yeah.
Well, all I can say is Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park was right, wasn't he?
About many things.
He's chaos theory or life finds a way.
Oh, everything. Yeah.
But just the whole thing. You're so obsessed about whether you could. You sort of think of you should.
That's 100% it. You know, someone commented on it on Twitter, and they had like listed like what all.
Sorry, what? On platform?
X. Sorry, right, yeah. I refuse to ever call it X. All the cons and then what the pros actually are. And there's almost like no pros to it really, and it is like sort of like bringing kind of democracy to like creativity. Fundamentally, though, I don't agree with that. You know, I was just talking about this to my in-laws the other night. People are like born with like different skills, inherent skills that they're good at. Like some people are really good at drawing, some people are really good at maths, some people are quite creative, some people aren't. That's kind of what makes us like interesting as a species, you know. And I think everyone having the ability to like be able to draw or make a video, personally, I don't think that's very interesting, and I think it's possibly like a net negative, because there's people who've spent years, and I'm not just saying this because this is what I do, but people have spent years training to do something to a high standard.
But that's going to be the interesting thing, though, isn't it? Because to use your example before, if you've got a big company that's got, as you say, the intern just typing prompts in to generate video assets, let's say, then okay, on the one level, what's output might tick some boxes, and the bosses of that company might go, yeah, that's what we want to put out. But if it doesn't get the same sort of engagement over time that previous videos that were created with people were, as an example, then at some point you have to look at that and go, right, well, what is it? And for me, it gets into the, as it stands now, about all this generation of stuff is actually recycling things.
Yeah.
It's pulling from other things
100%.
to create a new thing.
Yeah, it's not original.
And what you cannot replicate yet is the human brain's ability to just dream up new
100%, an original idea. Yeah. And that's like that's almost like a separate conversation. The fundamental issue with all this is that it's literally just taking other people's work from wherever it finds it and just sort of like regurgitating it in a new way. So that's like a terrible side of it, you know.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's just, you know, I was watching that like Sora tech demo thing where it was like the guy in the spacesuit. I don't know if you saw that one, in a sort of like open plain kind of daylight desert type scenario. And it's pretty much photoreal, this guy. But it's like you've got no control over like the angles and stuff, you know. And like you could just keep generating, asking it to prompt it. You could keep prompting it and generating it to kind of get different angles and then kind of cut them together and make something. But you don't have that like intentionality of like, I'm going to put the camera here and do this, do that there. And from your side of things, you know, like generating the idea from scratch because it's specific to what your client might need. You don't have that side of it, that like genuine like curation kind of the idea, if that makes sense. And
well, the other thing that's in this specific to, let's call it your side of the industry, is George Carlin, the comedian. Been dead for, I don't know, about 15 years. And weirdly, another comedian who is quite well known has got a podcast. There's two of them. And a few weeks ago, they used AI to create a new George Carlin comedy special. And they did it saying, look, this is what we're doing. We're very open about it. We'll put it on YouTube. The voice comes on at the start and it says, I'm an AI voice. This is what we're doing. It's an experiment. George Carlin's daughter came out and sued them for it, basically. And her whole point was, well, okay, you've made a thing that sounds, you know, to the uninformed person that could mistake it for my actual dad, because it does sound like him. But I listened to the first 5-10 minutes of it. If you've ever watched any George Carlin, the rhythm's off, the pacing's off. You're hearing bits that you literally go, oh yeah, that was like two jokes that he did and two different, you know, that came together. And that's the point I'm getting to is you can maybe create a shot that looks real, but you can't fake particularly emotion in acting and stuff like that. Like that's the bit that still will hopefully always continue to need actual people interpreting words on a page.
100%.
So in conclusion, the future is dark.
Unless you're an actor.
It's dark and bleak as Scott's previous show reel.
It's alright though. All we need to do is just turn the brightness up on the future. Problem solved.
But it's not all bleak, because I do think there's going to, I mean, if you follow any of the sort of, I follow quite a lot of artists on X, concept artists, comic book artists.
I think that was formerly Twitter.
And there's been a massive sort of pushback from them over the last year from the previous Mid-Journey, whatever, bits of software. So there's already like a big pushback against it. As you start to like bring video into it, you're going to get like the video community pushing back on it. So it's here to stay. But I just think it's how much we can kind of like battle it a little bit. And I don't think it's ever going to really replace video production companies, because you're going to...
It seems to me like the sort of thing that in your prep process you've talked about, your ability to more quickly go, right, I'm going to create a thing that looks like 70s prison, that's my reference, 70s prison films, to then either pull through AI images from those or generate images that are similar to films that you've got in mind. That sounds like a potentially good use of the technology as a shortcut in your prep, but it doesn't replace anything that you're actually going to do creatively.
And a director who I work with said that, you know, if he was doing like a sci-fi film or something, he could find a use for AI for that. For me, again, all the AI images just look too sharp and too crisp, so they don't look cinematic. Whereas a frame grab from a pre-existing film, at least it has that grain texture and the sort of softer look than Midjourney might do.
Retake the prompt, mate. Same again, but on a 50mm.
But I think at the minute I'm trying to just avoid it in regards to like my prep, because I kind of fundamentally like disagree with it. But there will be a point when I have to probably adapt and use it in some way. But at the minute,
there'll be a point. That point will be when your next producer introduces a new director who's an AI bot.
Just on a little screen.
Yeah, just an iPad on a Segway coming around. Nice to meet you, Scott.
Well, that seems like a good place to end it there.
On that bombshell.
Yeah. Cheers for coming in, Scott.
Thanks,
really
guys.
enjoyed that. That was great.
Thanks for coming on.
And thanks for watching or listening to the podcast. Really appreciate it. If you've liked this, give it a thumbs up, a like, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it.
Tell your friends, spread the link.
Yeah. And we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.